Black pilot told to wait outside. Minutes later, she shuts down the entire airline. Maya Daniels had always been told she flew like she was born with wings. Every time she took control of an aircraft, it felt like second nature, as if the sky itself welcomed her presence. But on one fateful December morning at the headquarters of Meridian Airlines, those wings were clipped, not by turbulence or technical failure, but by a sentence so simple, yet so devastating, that it would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. "Captain Daniels, we need you to wait outside." 7 words. 7 words that carried enough weight to shake an entire industry. 7 words that would ultimately bring one of America's oldest airlines crumbling down, not from the sky, but under the sheer gravity of its own corruption. The morning air was thick with fog at O'Hare International Airport, swirling around the tarmac like a ghostly veil as Maya made her way through the sprawling terminal. At 37, she exuded a quiet but undeniable confidence, the kind that came from years of experience, over 15,000 flight hours across nearly every continent. Only Antarctica remained unchecked on her list. Her uniform was pristine, her 4 gold stripes gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights as she wheeled her pilot's case through the concourse. A quick glance at her watch, 5:17 a.m. The briefing for Flight MA-27 to San Francisco was scheduled for 5:30, leaving her just enough time to grab a much-needed coffee from the crew lounge before meeting her co-pilot. Normally, these pre-flight rituals had a calming effect on her, a moment of quiet before the controlled chaos of takeoff. But today felt different. This day was monumental. After months of applications, interviews, and rigorous testing, today was her first day as a senior captain at Meridian Airlines, one of the most prestigious carriers in the country. A moment she had worked tirelessly for, sacrificing more than most could ever understand. As she approached the crew lounge, the door swung open, releasing the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with a quiet hum of morning conversations. Inside, pilots and flight attendants huddled around tables, some reviewing flight plans, others idly scrolling through their phones. But as Maya made her way to the coffee station, she noticed something, an almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. Conversation slowed, heads turned just slightly, curious glances exchanged in whispers. She was used to it. According to recent industry statistics, less than 1% of commercial airline pilots were Black women. The odds had always been stacked against her, but she had never let that stop her before. "You must be Captain Daniels," a voice said from behind. Turning, she met the gaze of a man in his 50s, salt and pepper hair neatly combed, for gold stripes matching her own. "Captain Richard Whitmore." He extended his hand. "Welcome to Meridian." Maya responded with a firm handshake. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here." "Richard," he corrected, offering a polite but tight-lipped smile. "I'll be your check captain for the next few weeks. I assume you've reviewed the flight path for today." "Yes, sir. I've memorized Meridian's SFO approach procedures and reviewed the weather patterns. We're expecting mild turbulence over the Rockies, but nothing out of the ordinary." Whitmore gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. "Good. The crew is waiting in briefing room C. I'll meet you there in 5. As he walked away, Maya felt an uneasy knot form in her stomach. Years in the cockpit had taught her to read people quickly. It was a necessary skill when your life depended on clear, unspoken trust between pilots. And something about Whitmore, it set off warning bells. She had encountered men like him before. The ones who smiled while silently calculating all the ways she might fail. Maya took a deep breath, pouring her coffee, the metallic surface of the coffee machine reflecting her determined expression. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "You'll have to be twice as good to get half as far." She had lived by those words her entire life. Graduated top of her class at the Air Force Academy. Served 8 years as a military transport pilot, including 3 tours in Afghanistan. Transitioned to commercial aviation with a flawless record. And yet, here she was. The briefing room buzzed with quiet energy as she entered. Seated around the table were 6 flight attendants and her co-pilot, First Officer James Chin, a young, skilled pilot with just under 5 years of commercial flying experience. He stood as she entered, offering a warm, genuine smile. "Captain Daniels, I've heard great things. Looking forward to flying with you." Before she could respond, the door swung open again. Thomas Barrett, Executive Operations Director, strode in, followed closely by Whitmore. Barrett, a tall man with a permanent frown etched into his face, cleared his throat before speaking. "There's been a change of plans." Maya immediately sensed it. The shift. The weight in the air. "Captain Whitmore will be taking command of Flight 207 today. Captain Daniels, we need you to wait outside while we reassign you." The room fell silent. Every eye turned to her. Heat crept up her neck. "May I ask why?" Her voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the edge beneath it. "I was scheduled for this flight weeks ago." Barrett glanced at Whitmore before responding. "It's a matter of experience. San Francisco can be a challenging approach, and given your unfamiliarity with our protocols." "With all due respect," Maya cut in, her voice unwavering, "I've flown into SFO 73 times over the past decade, including in severe weather. My qualifications were thoroughly reviewed during hiring." Barrett's tone hardened. "Captain Daniels, this isn't up for discussion. Please wait outside." For a moment, she considered pushing back harder. But not here. Not yet. With as much dignity as she could muster, she set down her flight documents and walked out. The hallway suddenly felt colder. She leaned against the wall, her mind racing. This wasn't just oversight. It wasn't just coincidence. It was deliberate. 10 minutes later, the door creaked open. But it wasn't Barrett or Whitmore, it was James. His expression was tight, his voice low. "Captain, I just wanted to say, I think this is complete nonsense." Maya's jaw clenched. "What did they say after I left?" James hesitated. "They claimed it's standard procedure for new captains, but I've been here 3 years. I've seen 4 new captains start. None of them got pulled from their first flight." A familiar weight settled in her chest. And then James leaned in. "There's more." He glanced down the hallway before continuing. "They've reassigned you to Shadow Flight 422 to Seattle. They say it's for acclimation to company procedures." Maya's breath slowed. "Who's captaining that flight?" James hesitated before saying the name that hit her like a hammer blow. "Harold Wilson. A man known for vocally opposing diversity in the cockpit." Maya exhaled slowly. She had a choice. File a complaint on day 1 and risk being labeled difficult, or play the long game. She had fought this fight before, and she knew exactly how to win. Pulling out her phone, she saw a message from her sister. "Knock them dead, sis. So proud of you." Maya smiled, because when this was over, they would all know her name. Flight 422 to Seattle became Maya's personal purgatory. Captain Harold Wilson, a man in his early 60s with thinning gray hair and a permanent scowl, acknowledged her presence with nothing more than a curt nod before proceeding to ignore her entirely during pre-flight preparations. The first officer, a nervous-looking man named Peter Lawson, shot her occasional apologetic glances, but remained silent. Maya sat in the jump seat behind them, observing as they went through the checklist. Wilson's methodical approach to flight preparation was impressive. She had to admit, whatever his personal failings, the man knew how to fly. But as the Boeing 737 pushed back from the gate, Wilson finally addressed her. "I don't know what kind of operation you came from, Captain Daniels," he said without turning around, "but at Meridian, we do things by the book. No shortcuts, no improvisations." The implication was clear. He assumed she was less rigorous, less professional. "I understand, Captain," Maya replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Standardization is the foundation of safety." Wilson grunted in response, seemingly disappointed. She hadn't taken the bait. The flight to Seattle was mercifully short, just under 2 hours. Throughout, Wilson made a point of narrating his actions in a condescending manner, as if Maya were a novice rather than a captain with thousands of hours of experience. She absorbed the humiliation silently, focusing instead on observing Meridian's specific procedures and protocols. During the descent into SEA, however, Wilson made an error. Minor but noticeable. He entered the wrong frequency for approach control. Lawson either didn't catch it or was too intimidated to speak up. Maya hesitated for a split second before deciding to intervene. "Captain," she said calmly, "I believe Seattle approach is on 28.35 today, not 124.75. The cockpit went silent. Wilson's shoulders tensed visibly before he checked the approach chart. "That's correct," he said stiffly, adjusting the radio. "Thank you, Captain Daniels." The acknowledgement clearly cost him, and Maya expected that to be the end of any interaction. But as they taxied to the gate after landing, Wilson surprised her. "You have a good eye," he said, still not looking at her. "Most wouldn't have caught that." "Thank you, sir." "Don't misunderstand," he continued, his voice hardening. "One good catch doesn't make you Meridian material. This airline has standards, traditions. Not everyone fits." The message couldn't have been clearer if he had spelled it out. Maya felt a cold anger seize within her. "With respect, Captain, traditions evolve. They have to." Wilson finally turned to face her, his pale blue eyes cold. "Not at Meridian, they don't." The rest of the day passed in a blur of passive-aggressive slights and thinly veiled hostility. After returning to Chicago, Maya was informed she would be shadowing different captains for the remainder of the week. All men, all with reputations similar to Wilson's. The pattern was obvious. They were hazing her, hoping she'd quit. That evening, Maya sat in her newly rented apartment in Chicago, a glass of Cabernet in hand as she video-called her sister. "They did what?" Zoe's indignation filled the screen, her lawyer instincts immediately activating. "Maya, that's textbook discrimination. You could sue them into oblivion." "And then what?" Maya sighed, sinking deeper into her couch. "Be known as the black woman who sued her way into the cockpit? I'd never have the crew's trust." Zoe's frustration was palpable. "So, you're just going to take it?" "That's not the Maya I know." "I didn't say that," Maya replied, a hint of steel entering her voice. "I said I'm not suing. Yet. There are other ways to fight." "What's your plan?" Maya took a sip of wine, considering. "I need to understand what I'm dealing with. This feels organized. Systemic. I need to know if this is isolated to a few dinosaurs, or if it goes deeper." "Be careful, sis," Zoe warned. "These corporate types protect their own." "I know. But I didn't come this far to be pushed out before I even get started." Later that night, unable to sleep, Maya opened her laptop and began researching Meridian Airlines more thoroughly. Founded in 1967, the company had grown from a regional carrier to a national airline with international routes. Its safety record was solid, if unexceptional. Its leadership was overwhelmingly white and male, with only 2 women on the board of directors and not a single person of color in upper management. More telling were the employee reviews on various job sites. Scanning dozens of posts, Maya noticed a pattern. Glowing reviews from white male employees contrasted with less enthusiastic ratings from women and minorities, who often mentioned an old boy network and an unwelcoming atmosphere, without providing specifics. Maya dug deeper, searching for any lawsuits or complaints against the airline. She found 3 discrimination suits in the past decade, all settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. 2 involved female flight attendants. 1 concerned a Hispanic ground crew supervisor. She was about to close her laptop when a news article from 8 months ago caught her eye. Meridian Airlines faces FAA scrutiny over maintenance logs. The piece was brief, mentioning only that the Federal Aviation Administration was conducting a routine review of Meridian's maintenance procedures after minor discrepancies were found in their documentation. Maya bookmarked the article, making a mental note to look into it further. It might be nothing. Airlines faced FAA reviews periodically. But something about the timing nagged at her. Meridian had recently expanded its routes to include more international destinations, putting pressure on its maintenance teams to keep planes in service. Could corners be getting cut? The next morning, Maya reported for her shadowing assignment on a flight to Denver, this time with Captain Andrew Peterson. To her surprise, Peterson turned out to be cordial if reserved. Mid-flight, after they'd reached cruising altitude, he turned to her. For what it's worth, he said quietly, not all of us agree with how you're being treated. Maya studied him carefully. But you're not speaking up either. Peterson had the grace to look embarrassed. It's complicated. Meridian is traditional. That word again, Maya noted. It seemed to cover a multitude of sins. Look, Peterson said, lowering his voice further. Watch yourself around Barrett and Wilson. They've been friends for 30 years. Barrett protects Wilson and his circle no matter what. No matter what. Maya pressed. Even if they're putting safety at risk? Peterson's expression changed, a flash of unease crossing his features. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, Maya replied. Is there something I should know? Captain Peterson faced forward again, his posture stiffening. I've said too much already. Just keep your eyes open. The cryptic warning stayed with Maya throughout the day. Between flights, she made a decision. She wasn't just going to fight for her place at Meridian. She was going to take the entire system down.